You are listening to Seniors Junction podcast. We're working to prevent seniors isolation one conversation at a time. Your hosts today, Namrata Bagaria and myself, Paul Merkley. We are the co-founders of Seniors Junction. Our very special guest today is Ruta Pai. She is the engagement director of Providence House Senior Living in Massachusetts. Welcome very much. Welcome, Ruta.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. It's really great to meet you, Namrata and Paul. And thank you for inviting me to be on this podcast. So, as you know, Paul told you a little bit about me. My name is Ruta Pai. I'm the engagement director at Providence House Assisted Living. I'm also a registered dance movement therapist with the American Association of Dance Therapy. And I'm also a mental health clinician at my current workplace. So I sort of wear many hats, which I definitely enjoy because I think the reason that I chose to go into this a bit of an unconventional, as most would say, a profession is dance movement therapy. But I feel like, so I grew up in India and I felt that not everybody has the vocabulary to express themselves. And if you see a lot of Indians, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical here, but we do use a lot of gestures, and you will see me using a lot of gestures.
Me too. Paul likes it. He's like, you guys are like the closest to Italians as it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that's, where I realized that a lot of people do use a lot of gestures in expressing themselves. And I have, always danced since I was 5, and that was my way of expressing myself. I express myself through dance, I express myself through movement. And I think during my undergraduate studies, I stumbled on this workshop on dance movement therapy. And I was also studying psychology at that time, and I was like, wow, this is the perfect marriage of dance and psychology. So I explored that a little bit more, and I do strongly believe in the healing power of movement or any art for that matter. I do believe that there's power in art therapy. I do believe there's a power of healing in music, in drama, in dance. So I decided to pursue that. And I'm grateful that I get to bring that into my current workplace and do dance movement therapy based groups, with my seniors at the assisted living. Yeah.
That's amazing. By the way, Paul, side note, we trained at the same places, but in different geographies. She did
Okay,
Bharatanatyam, which I
that's
did. Then
great.
she went to Shamak Davar and she did Sandeep Parker, which is the salsa. So when I spoke to her, I was like, wow, we
Yeah,
have so much in common.
absolutely.
Wonderful,
Yeah. I mean, it was
wonderful.
very
Yeah,
relatable. Yeah.
yeah.
To an outsider, the uh, precision and nuance of Indian dance is astonishing
Yeah.
to an outsider.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is because there's nothing called Indian per se, right? It's all regional and cultural. So it's so much of variety. And then of course what's popular is the TV Bollywood dancing. That's totally different. Like I mean, it's not belonging to one kind, right? It's so yeah, it's there's a lot of stereotype there. But yeah, sometimes it's true. Like most Indians, we are like even if they're not dancers, you put on music, they will bop along. Like it's
Yeah.
especially if you see Indian weddings, they are like those DJ parties, they happen. So most people, even they don't dance, they will dance there.
And I think you bring a really good point, Namrata, because I think um, dance is such an integral part of the Indian culture. Um, and it's, I mean, you will see all these beautiful different forms of dancing and communal dancings.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of our regional and cultural festivals have their like own folk
exactly.
dancing where the community as a whole comes together and
Yeah.
enjoys the festivities as a group.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that I really, am proud of, as it is a part of my culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that probably, helps me to use dance as a way to express myself, because it's so deeply rooted in the culture and
Yeah.
it just comes so naturally to people.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it also gives a lot of people a sense of belonging, a sense of belonging to a community, being a part of a community. So I think there's like so many social benefits to
Yeah.
dancing. Is
Well,
one.
it's almost like the choir that when we interview seniors who grew up on the farm, they all either went to the choir or play an instrument. It's
Yeah.
similar to that kind of a cultural thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. Like we also have a like the god of dance, Shiva.
Yeah.
So we also have it sanctified as a holy thing, right? So it's not something. It's intrinsic. It's nothing extrinsic about it. It's intrinsic, and it's like so for me. I don't know. You'll barely find people who don't dance. Like you barely. Like I'm not saying the stellar dance performers, and then some of them will tell you, okay, give me two glasses of some kind of a liquor, and I'll be ready to dance two pegs. So that's also another kind of. I'm not endorsing it, but some people say that. But it's a thing. So when you do. We will get to the solutions, but when you do some programming in India around seniors, it's very easy to get them to dance or do kind of a movement, like because yoga is also there, right? So no, so yoga also emphasizes on movement, and dance is nothing but with music and synchronized version of it, I would say. Not as flexible but little more. Anyway, so coming back to the topic, we digress so much in the first question. Since you wear different hats, Ruta, you must have come across social isolation and even physical isolation in seniors. So can you tell us in the past 2 years what has been your experience with isolation?
um, so I did get to experience it very closely. I can say that because I started this job at the peak of COVID. Um, and I was terrified. Everybody else was terrified. We don't know what it was. Um, we were literally wearing trash bags because nobody had any PPE really. So we were literally wearing trash bags and going around and doing things for our seniors. Everybody was sort of um, forced to isolate. I refer to that as forced isolation. Um, because we couldn't really have residents come together for meals, their regular routines, or come out for activities. Everybody was forced to stay inside their apartments, of course, because of, for their own safety. But that definitely took a great, great, great toll on their mental health as well as their physical health. Because we had a lot of seniors who were regular at our exercise classes. That was their routine that helped them to stay healthy. They couldn't do that anymore. A lot of people relied on that social interaction. When they would come out for meals, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, and they couldn't do that anymore. So a very precious part of their routine was just suddenly taken away from them. And that is, that brings up so much grief too. That brings up so much disconnection, not just from your friends, but also from your families. Our entire community was just so socially disconnected. And I think a lot of us were also at loss of what do we do? How should we do this? How should we engage everybody? And it did take us a little bit of time to come up with some creative ideas, but it was just so much because to give you an example, we had one resident who underwent a chemo treatment in that period of COVID. And when she returned from her treatment, she had to isolate because we couldn't let her out of the apartment. We couldn't let anybody out of their apartment for their own safety. And if I were to just put myself in her shoes, and if we were all to put ourselves in her shoes, and having gone through such an intense treatment that takes so much toll on your physical and mental health, and then having to isolate yourself without any support, without being able to, see your family, your friends, that's a lot. um, I think there are so many more residents. A couple of our residents lost their spouses to COVID, and they had to stay by themselves. There was no support. There was nobody to comfort them. There was nobody to talk to because you couldn't really come out of your apartment. So I think it was painful for me to see that happen in the community. And there was like a sense of, I should say, shared isolation as well, because I feel like all of them were sort of going through the same isolation at the same time. So I like to call it like a collective isolation in a way. And it was just painful to see that happen. Um, and I feel like even before COVID, I should say that senior isolation has been one of the concerning issues with this population for sure. Because I feel like when that transition happens, um, from moving out of your home to a senior living, that in itself is a very important and sensitive transition period for a lot of seniors. And I don't think that the society or the system um, emphasizes how important that transition period is. And I feel like a lot of the times what happens is they're sort of picked up from their own home where they've lived for so many years, where they have had so many memories, and sort of dumping them into this community. Um, and I have also seen so many residents, a lot of the new residents who, move into our communities, sort of struggle with adjusting. And I don't think there is, sort of a designated position in senior living communities for checking in. And I think just because of my background in psychology and mental health, I just sort of took that on myself. And that's sort of become a routine where when somebody new comes into our community, I have what we call a buddy system. So I sort of get to know their interests, their hobbies, and then try to find a buddy for them from the community who sort of helps them with this transition so they don't feel like they're by themselves. A lot of the time, our residents are introverts, and have a hard time reaching out or hard time initiating that social connection, and in turn end up feeling very, very lonely and very, very isolated. So this buddy system that I came up with, it really helps residents to sort of, be friends with somebody who may have similar interests. And it's always easier for anyone, I mean, irrespective of the age, to connect with somebody who we have something in common with. So, I mean, I try to sort of, try to um, come up with ideas as to make this transition easier for them. So when they move into this community, they don't feel like I don't know what's going on, because it's new and it's a change, and change is hard. And I don't think a lot of the times we emphasize on this enough. I think it's that first couple of weeks or even a month that it's so important for us to just check in with the residents, or see what they need, see how they're doing here, if they're happy, if they're having difficulties adjusting. I feel like that transition period in itself is so, so important. Um, so yeah, and I mean, even after that, I mean, in COVID actually, something that I came up with, because I just couldn't. I could feel that. I mean, I'm such a like I'm very much of an empath, because being a mental health clinician, that sort of like drilled into you. So I couldn't help but put myself in their shoes and sort of see that if I were to be in a community or in a communal living, And I had my routine of going for activities, seeing my friends every day, going for exercises, and that was suddenly taken away from me. How would I feel? How isolated would I feel? How depressed I would feel? So we started sort of like hallway games. So we had some small hallways in our community. So we started doing bowling. And so residents would just like stay in their apartments with their door open and watch people bowl. And we would like arrange all the pins on the other end of the hallway, have somebody come out one at a time and do bowling. We did hallway bingo. We did hallway exercises, you know, just to find creative ways to keep them engaged and to be able to see somebody else's face, even because I think we have this magical thing that I'm always really interested in is mirror neurons, and that is something that when you see somebody's face, you see their emotions, you in turn sort of feel those emotions, and that was my way of helping our residents sort of feel that connection with others and also with themselves by just being able to see others in those difficult times, or being able to feel that I do have somebody right next door to me and I can see them or I can hear them, even though I can, physically spend time with them. I am a part of a community and that I'm not alone. Um, so yeah, it was a difficult time, but it also sort of forced us to be more creative, and to see how we can do different things to make sure that our residents are not feeling depressed or not feeling like um, not feeling very lonely. So it was a challenging time, but we got through it. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think you're a tremendous asset to the field.
Thank you.
Some of the things you say remind me of our podcast with our thanatologist that we had, Karen Omund. So actually, leaving their house in the first place is a loss because one supposes that they were familiar with the neighborhood and probably had acquaintances who said hi to them. So we take away those social connections, plunk them in a new place. And at which point our company says, well, we have a little diagnostic we give people to measure how much they've lost from where they were to where they are, and then how much socialization they would like to have. So I think it's great. You've answered in large measure this next question, but I'll just ask if you want to add anything about your vision for tackling the problem of social isolation in seniors.
Um, so post COVID, I'd say what's happened is that we have this term in psychology, sort of learned helplessness. Um, you know, um, so I feel like a lot of our residents, because they were forced to isolate for almost over a year, I think they have just found a bit of a comfort staying inside their apartments. And that's making it so much more difficult for a lot of activity professionals, including myself, to get them out of their apartments. Because now, we're all vaccinated, we've all received the booster, and the risks are very, very low. And we have all our activities, back to normal. But the residents will always, come to you and say, "Oh, there's nothing going on. I didn't even notice that this was going on," because I think they're just so used to, "Oh, there's nothing going on, so let's just stay in our apartment. There is nothing going on. Let's just stay in our apartment." So that I think what I call is learned helplessness. So I think they're so used to that isolation that even now, when we're no longer required to stay indoors, it's really challenging for them to come out of their apartments and engage. And I think that's probably, I would say, one of the things that I am definitely struggling with. And for, I think, my vision to improve this um, isolation that, that they're habitual to now, is to just be persistent. I mean, I literally go around, knock on every single resident's door, and let them know that, oh, we have so and so entertainment happening at 2:30 this morning. Would you like to come? And sometimes, because they're so used to isolating themselves, they just don't even um, look at the schedules, because in their heads they still have that habit that, oh, nothing's going on. After meals we stay indoors, after breakfast we stay indoors. So I really try to go around and make sure to get them out of their apartments and show them that we have so many things going on. And after they do come for entertainment, or we sometimes have happy hours, so they do come for happy hours, they get to have that nice social interaction. And after that they will come to me and they'll say, oh, thank you for letting me know, I had such a great time. So I think it's just about trying really hard to let them know that you matter, and that we are here um, to help you get out of that isolation, because I think a lot of the residents are still struggling with that. It's about being
Learned helplessness. Thank
learn
you.
helplessness. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's and I think it's something that they probably are not even aware of, because it just happens so unconsciously, that it's us as activity professionals or mental health clinicians who have to sort of reach out. Because after COVID, I realized that we just needed to start something that's going to give people hope. So I started Gratitude Circle, which is based more on like a positive psychology realm. And in the Gratitude Circle, as we started building more and more trust, I realized that a lot of people who were coming to the group were dealing with so much grief and loss. Um, a lot of the residents lost their children, a lot of them lost their spouses, their close friends, their relatives who they were close to, and they never got to see them. They never got to go for the funerals, even. And that was a lot, and they were holding on to it for so long, until we created this safe space where they felt safe enough to open up about it. And that was the point where I just created a grief support group, because I realized that even in the group, when one person would open up about their grief and loss, it encouraged somebody else to open up about their grief and loss. And that was another way of connecting, and another way of feeling that you're not alone in this, or I'm not alone in this. I have somebody else who's going through, or is in the same boat as myself. Um, and some people would even share stories about how they got over their grief and loss. We had some residents who opened up about how hard it was for them when they lost their spouses years ago, and how they processed that grief and how they overcome some of the challenges, and that just created such a beautiful space for people to come in, to share, to connect, to be to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel supported. And that was also one of the ways, and one of my visions of helping people feel more connected. Because a lot of the I mean after COVID, because of a lot of challenges that a lot of residents went through, the level of depression and anxiety in many of our residents went through the roof. And it was very important for them to know that they're not alone in this, that there are other people. And that was just And I think that's my vision, is to understand the needs and the individual needs of, seniors, and what they need, and just finding a community, or finding a group where they feel that, I'm a part of a group and I'm not alone. Because a lot of the times when I spoke one on one to a lot of residents who were going through depression post COVID, they felt like they were the only ones. They felt like, oh, I'm the only one who's going through this. I'm sad all the time. What are other people going to think about me? And by having that sort of a self talk, they were just isolating themselves, because they didn't even know that there was probably few other people who are going through the same challenges as they are. So I
Mhm.
think it's about finding different ways for them to connect. Some people, may just want to connect for fun. And a best way of connecting for them, or helping them get over that isolation, would be to finding somebody who has common interests with them. For some people, it's with grief, and sharing that grief with somebody is how they connect and how they feel less isolated. So I think it's such a multi-factor and multifaceted thing.
Yes.
And I think there are so many different ways to do that. I think my vision and how I see it is, because I am very person centered. My approach is very person centered, because I feel like what may work for one senior may not work for some,
Mhm.
the other senior. So I really try to understand the individual needs of, the seniors that I'm talking to,
Mhm.
and just sort of find a way to see how I can best help them with
No,
that.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think what I heard was it's rebuilding belonging. That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
Um, One of the things that we talk about is different strokes for different folks, uh,
absolutely.
right? And I think moving to my next question, but before that, I'll give you a little request. Before we started recording, we talked about leadership buy-in and how you're able to do what you do because you've moved from essentially a medical model to a psychosocial model of care. I think if you could use that as a starting point to answer my next question, the challenges and the opportunities in delivering the person centered mission.
Sure. So it's very hard, and I think, as you mentioned a little bit about the challenges of having to um, sort of convince this system, who is based and focused on a medical model, that there is so much more than just medical model. Because for me, dance movement therapy is not considered as a really evidence-based approach. So dance movement therapists, to be very honest, are not taken as seriously as psychiatrists are, or social workers are, because it's more of an unconventional model. But it focuses on the premise, or it's centered in the belief that our mind and body are interconnected. So it's not just important to address the physical issues and the physical um, elements, but it's also important to focus on the holistic well-being. And nothing against the medical model. I mean, with a lot of serious mental health disorders or physical issues, medicines are very important to manage the symptoms. But I feel like, in addition to that, it's so much more important to um, make individuals feel that they have the coping skills they need. And I feel like medical model sort of lacks that. And to give you a very simple example, I am sort of right now counseling one of our seniors, who's going through a hard time, has mental health issues, has a lot of anxiety. And this person has always had medications for the anxiety. But now she's at a point where the medications are not working, because the medical model can only serve you to an extent. And she will always come to me and say that, oh, can you prescribe any medication? Can I have some medication that will cure this? But a lot of these issues, a lot of the social issues or psychosocial issues are so much beyond medicine. And what comes in handy with these issues is engagement, or how, different ideas and different creative ideas as to how you can support a lot of these psychosocial issues. And it it aches my heart, but I have to tell this client a lot of times that you have to sit with the emotions, you have to process them, and I will help you find the coping skills. And the coping skills can range from based on what the client needs.
Yeah.
But this client is at a point where the medications are not working anymore, and this client was prescribed the highest dose of medications and they're not working because
Yeah.
your brain at some point becomes immune to even the medications. So I feel like, yes, medical model, yes, it's evidence based, it's proven to work wonders, but at the same time we have to look at the overall well-being of the individual, and especially seniors. And I think I go to a lot of residents' apartments and they have stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of medications, but it's still not working. So what's lacking, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think there's something to look at there. So if you have stacks and stacks and stacks of medication, but you still have the same amount of anxiety,
Yeah.
so what is it that we're not doing? What is it that we're not looking at?
Yeah.
What are some of the needs that we're not meeting?
Yeah.
And that's why I feel it's so important and it's so challenging to convince, um, a lot of these businesses that are based in a medical model that art works. I mean, I have had
Mm.
such a struggle, to be honest, because when I was applying for a lot of jobs, there are no jobs for, I mean, I shouldn't say no, but there are very few jobs for dance movement therapists. Because when you approach somebody and you say, okay, I did my master's, specialized in dance movement therapy, their first question would be, oh, so do you teach dance? So there's so much lack of awareness of what these different forms of art are. There are so many different ways to express, um, and there are so many different interventions. There are so many different programs to look at, but I think medical model really sort of limits you.
Mhm.
I mean, it was really challenging. It's still a struggle for me.
Yeah.
It's still a struggle for me to create a place for professionals like myself and to convince that it's not just dance. I don't come here and dance with residents, but I use dance and movement as a way of expression.
Mhm.
And there is enough research to prove that movement and dance has so much physical, mental, social, spiritual benefits to individual. And same goes with all these different forms of art. And I feel like, I mean, I because I've experienced how beneficial it is for my own self. I think it becomes a bit easier for me to not get affected when people are not receptive of these ideas, because I know in my heart it works. I have seen it work with the groups that I have led using these different interventions. So I think I'm gonna continue advocating. I'm gonna continue
Yeah.
advocating that there are all these different interventions, there are all these programs that focus on the psychosocial issues, and they're as important as somebody's physical well-being.
Yeah.
Mental health, their social isolation, and all these issues are, I mean, they need to receive in enough, and I would say more than enough, like focus and attention as we do to all these physical issues, because your mind and body is interconnected.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's the mental health issues that in turn sort of result in these physical issues.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of awareness about this. There is so much, and so I get it. I relate to your struggle as well, that it's so hard to advocate for these programs, advocate for these interventions that
Yeah.
are not necessarily based in the mainstream medical model.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
I do feel like if if you believe in it, and if you believe in the power of it, if you believe in the value of it, then it just becomes easier to continue to advocate for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you were saying, that's how I lost my father, right? So for me, it's a very personal journey. He had the best medical treatment, but he was not. He was so isolated and burnt out. He was a lawyer, right? So once they retired, they have nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I have seen that in my own personal life. And then after he passed away, my mom was like, "Okay, now what should I do?" Because she was a caregiver, right?
Yeah.
And then I think past few months she's become an artist, because again, you from Indian background, you'll appreciate the grief counseling is not really a thing. I took it for myself because I believe in the power of it, and I so find you can't force people because you have to respect people's autonomy. But then through art, um, I see the colors, I see the, and so it's become an open door for creativity, and that's where the vision of our company comes in, because I appreciate that a lot of the activity directors or a lot of the program managers, they help people try new things. Let's say, let's do an art, let's do a gratitude.
Yeah.
But for us, we want you to find something that sticks with you.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a whole process of making something your thing. One
Mm-hmm.
is discovering art, and then the second is owning it, right? And
Yeah.
that journey that suddenly, like now, my mom can just do canvas by herself, right? And she's never held a brush. So
Right.
when I have seen that transformation, and even my own life, I started Kathak 2.5 years ago. It stuck throughout everything for me. I'm not the best Kathak dancer out there, but it just helps me. It just helps me cope. Poetry writing, I published my own book. So, right, so serious leisure, that's something we discovered. It definitely helps with loneliness and both isolation.
Mm-hmm.
But like where we are in our journey, the evidence base, because the evidence or the way literature is, which I'm doing, they'll have one thing, like they'll talk about, let's say, doing this art, and then the
Right.
next research is about doing something else. So to create an evidence base, there's not enough data to do like a
Yeah.
meta-analysis or a dose prescription for social prescription, right? And
Right.
so then companies like ours, we'll have to keep pivoting the business uh, till the concept makes sense. Yes, there's a staffing shortage, there is an afternoon evening programming, common sense, but then still the sales is not happening, even though the gap is there. So where do we fix our narrative in selling, right? So no, what you're saying is very well received, Paul.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I wanted just to insert that if our thanatologist guest were here, she would probably, or she might say, there's a big difference between chronic sadness and depression. And if a person is suffering from chronic sadness, antidepressants are ineffective.
Yeah.
Prescription for chronic sadness and grief lies in new purpose and activities and reconnection, lies in these social questions that we're trying to address rather than in a chemical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chemical, I'm not against, I'm all for antidepressants.
Right.
They work for depression, they don't work for sadness
Mm-hmm.
and grief. So do they work for grief? Well, if there's depression, it could be very useful. If it's a heavy sadness, maybe not.
Yeah.
So I want to know, if you don't mind, what advice you would have for us in our venture.
I mean, I'm glad that, Namrata, you told me a little bit about, sort of your journey, and what sort of motivated you, to start this initiative. Um, I think I would just say, if you do believe in, creating these programs, and you do believe in the value and power of it, um, then just keep moving forward. And there will be people who are probably going to say that, oh, we don't think this is going to work. But I'm sure that, because I feel like a lot of awareness is happening right now. So, for example, at my workplace, I'm sure that, I mean, I've worked in previous assisted livings, and the first person that they would sort of introduce the potential residents to with the nurse, because it's a medical model. We provide XYZ care, and we have like XYZ medication system. But at my workplace, our executive director would introduce them to me first, and let me sort of talk about how our program stands out from all the other programs, because we focus on using art as expression. And that's something that not a lot of other communities are doing at the moment, using different expressive arts therapeutically. So I would say that, I think it um, just keep moving
Yeah.
forward. And if you believe in it, I know one day for sure that others will believe in the power and value of the programs for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, I think the second challenge is one is the content, which somewhere we have a buy-in, like yes, these content, because you said awareness. But the second issue is because we created the company in middle of COVID, right? Like because the idea was
Mm-hmm.
because before that to enter a senior community was very hard. There was already certain vendors who were doing
Yeah.
things, and it was not such a pronounced problem, right? The whole life, so it was there, but it was like something in the background. People knew it's there, let's not even bother, it's always there. Or that was normalized to, well, that's what happens when you get old, right? It's not true, that's not what
Yeah.
happens when you
Yeah.
get old, but it was almost like a culture normalized
Yeah.
ageism of kinds, but with us, I mean, especially my background being in digital and online. So I was like, well, this is the 1990s for this kind of business. Let's get with digital, and suddenly realizing that there's not even basic Wi-Fi to even have a decent video call, and then we are back to drawing board. Like, okay, should we do what recorded content? Because it's very different when you do this. The healing of this interaction. Let's say you have 5 people on the call, and they leave with that,
Mhm.
versus you just heard content from me, and I'm saying how great drawing a bird is. It's very different. Like there's a, so for us it is this, how do you not dilute what you have to offer, because we've tested it and it works. And then with every, the thing is, seniors are not one age group, right? They're buckets of it.
Yeah.
Their digital literacies are different.
Yeah.
Their expectation of life at that point where they are is different. So we are actually literally back to the drawing board saying which seniors, because we've noticed the ones who are congregated are not digital, and the ones who are digital are so spread out that the marketing cost as a business is insanely prohibitive,
It
you
is.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
so we don't know, like we don't know what the answer lies. We're figuring out the answer, especially given that we want to continue with the digital quest, and it's only a matter of 3 to 5 years where all senior homes will have a decent Wi-Fi, because when the next generation of seniors come, they're not going to accept that the Wi-Fi doesn't work. It's a digitally savvy seniors who are going to start moving in.
Yeah.
So I think we will see the break even point in that time. So we know that, okay, there's that coming up, but in between that, we need to balance every quarter as a business and go about,
Yeah.
paying salaries or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is. It does sound quite challenging, and I agree with the digital part, because at my workplace we have, I would say, 50% that's very tech savvy, and then we have the other 50% who just has such a hard time and they struggle with technology. But I think it is a lot of the content, um, especially in COVID and also post COVID, that we have is digital.
exactly.
Um, and especially, because activity professionals are only there for a certain amount of day, certain hours during the day. It's like nine to
Exactly.
five, and then we go home. But then there is you know, quite a number of residents who don't know what to do from after dinner until bedtime. And there
Exactly.
is nobody there to really do any activities or engage them. And I feel like that sort of gap can definitely be filled by offering digital content. Um, and but I totally understand your point, where Wi-Fi or internet is the basic.
Yeah, well, because if we are doing a video call and if it's cutting, right? If it's cutting, you will perceive our company as poor quality, though it's not us, it's your
Right.
internet which is
Yeah.
cutting.
Yeah.
And if you don't do the engagement piece, well, then it's like you're throwing another content, like then I mean even other companies, because we don't, because we're still in somewhat restrictions, we don't have access to hi-fi studios to record high quality, like
Right.
we can compete with Nat Geo or History Channel, we can't, we just can't, we're not there, right? That's not our business model either. We have so for us it's become like this thing that everybody agrees this is the gap, we found the right gap, the medium has become, and that's where we need to go, what is the right medium? Because if you want, let's say, aggregated seniors who are living in this housing community and their age groups are also older, like 85 and above, they're
Mhm.
5 to 15% of them have emails, so we know those numbers through talking to so many people. But I think this is the question we internally are asking ourselves. And of course, there are answers. If you want to solve a problem, we are not married to our solution, because we know that the digital piece is just a method of delivering. The real meat is the arty stuff that you talk about, right?
Right.
And
Right.
we've got the best of the artists doing things with you, which you will enjoy. And also as a business to keep lean, all our instructors are all over Canada and the US, right? So I can't even get my teachers in one room because one is on one coast of the world and one is on the other coast of it. And because it's digital, they can, deliver information anytime. So we are also sort of toying with the idea of maybe we record stuff and give recorded links. But again, with the link, the issue is if you have bad Wi-Fi, even a link will not work, because to continuously stream something from even a link, that's, so then it comes down to, okay, do you put it in a pen drive and deliver? And then how many pen drives will people copy that content, right? Because you give one pen drive and it can be passed along. And as a business, then that's not business really. So then that's just charity.
Well,
And so,
plus our model is a cohort-based model for good reasons.
right.
We
Mhm.
Because
have good reasons for saying no, live and cohort-based, because that builds community.
Yeah.
So
yeah, yeah,
it's difficult,
yep,
but that said, you validated so much of what we've been thinking
yeah.
and given me other things to think about too.
Yeah, and our listeners, if you have ideas for us, like please email us. We are happy to discuss, because that's where the power of startups lies. Co-designing solutions.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do agree. And I mean, it's very important when the programs are live, because I think that also really helps residents to connect well. Um, so, but I mean, definitely, I mean, having a live program comes with its own
internet,
challenges.
basic
Having
internet.
good Wi-Fi, the basics, really. Having good Wi-Fi on both the ends, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we
it,
interviewed another activity director and he told us, like engagement director like you, and he said, you know what, you want to do digital? Guess what? We have one person who is in charge of charging their devices, because many of them do not remember to charge their
yeah,
devices.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's humbling. And then you sort of start wondering, okay, where do you start? So of course we have enough information. We've not made a decision on where to pivot. And by the time this podcast will be released, I mean, I guess we would have had more decisions made. But it's fun to listen to what you say, because it's validating, and sometimes it's frustrating that okay, you're in the right space, but now you need to really, I guess we need to get so deeper to really crack the code, because it's like almost like you're touching the center, but you're off, like a little off.
Yeah,
Okay, it's something like that. And Ruta, this was such a brilliant podcast. So if people want to find and reach out to you, how can they do that?
They can look me up on LinkedIn by my name, or they can even reach out to me via email. My email is rutap95@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or anything more you would like to know about, expressive arts or anything for that matter. But it was really great to be on this podcast and be able to talk about this population, which is so near and dear to my heart. So thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. It was great to have this conversation with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.